Any time of day or night, you can bury us with your criticisms. We do not mind. We appreciate the content. We do not mind, after many years doing this, that sometimes you break out the talons and you tell us yet again, the game has passed you by. You used to be something, and now you guys stink. So this person writes in, first 6 minutes into your show after I have to fast forward past the 5 minutes of nothing that keeps happening, I guess so they can get more time in their views, learn how to edit. And Dan's another 3 things we've never seen before. Ugh, every day there's something. This show hasn't been funny in a while. What happened when someone says something wrong and we all just make fun of them? Then Mike would replay it like 20 times and I would legit LOL. Now just boring ass sports talk and self-involved things you guys get to do when you have millions and millions of dollars and live on a beach. Wow, how relatable.
You don't get the show.
Wait, so we don't make fun of each other anymore?
Who lives on the beach?
I mean, they're not wrong, but I don't have to say it so harshly.
I also love how learn how to edit was spelled lean how to edit.
Oh, no.
There is Whittingham.
Dude, he's out today.
No, it does.
The tie is off.
It really feels good, though, to lash somebody over a grammatical error. Put it on the poll at Le Batard Show. Does it feel good to lash someone in the face over a typo or grammatical error? And I would say our social media addicted audience would say that one of the worst feelings in the world is having a great joke on Twitter and it's got a typo in it. It's got some sort of mistake.
You delete it or you live with it. Some mistakes you can live with. Some typos you can live with, but some you gotta delete.
As long as they're getting retweets, you just have to eat it.
Yeah.
At Le Batard Show, put it on the poll. What are my choices here? You have written a great tweet that has a typo in it.
Leave it or delete it.
Eat it or delete it. At Le Batard Show. Billy, why did you say that you think you might have had the wrong dream?
Well,
Like in life or last night?
no, in life. Oh, wow. Yeah, no, because we talked last week, you and I and Jessica, and I think Woody was involved in it too, about how you really shouldn't achieve your dreams too quickly, right? Because then life is just like a giant disappointment after that. That was kind of the gist of it, right?
Like you don't want to peak in high school type thing?
Yeah. So like I was looking up at Sports Center this morning, and I saw 2, relatively young anchors, and I just said, you know what?
Hell yeah. Wow, I didn't. Given Amin's issues last night.
I mean, yankers. I wasn't expecting a yanker. We'll get to the Amin sound in a second, but continue, Billy.
So I was watching. I was like, you know what? I'm never going to do that. That's just not ever going to happen for me. Nothing like that. So then I walked around, and I was like asking the room, and I was like, hey, gang, do you guys have
Just like that.
you guys have any dreams that you had as a youngster that you realize you're just never going to accomplish?
Did you have dreams of being a Sports Center anchor? A young Sports Center anchor? Were you studying broadcasting at FIU?
Yeah, I got a minor in journalism, but yeah, I got a minor in that. I think that may be what we forgot about earlier, because when I said, do any of you guys have dreams that you never accomplished? Tony said, yeah, to play in the NBA, and I said, come on, guy. Like, we were talking about realistic ones. And then he didn't like that very much.
He's delusional. What is... Billy, you're going to need to explain to me. It's an arrogance unlike any I've ever seen.
It's a dream,
Dan.
He's still dreaming back here that the Heat are going to pick him up and he's going to run in the G League and he's going to torch people.
But in his defense, it's a dream. And you're like, you delusional idiot. It's a dream.
Well, I mean, because I was, trying to have a realistic conversation. I'm not here for funny business. So I said, does anyone have any dreams that, they feel like they're just never going to accomplish? So when it comes back with to be in the NBA, it's like, come on, buddy, get real. You know what I mean?
But yours was to be a Bristol anchor?
I don't know about that, but I just watched it and I was like, I'm just never going to do that. And then I just started having like this midlife crisis, and I know what you're going to say. You're only, how old am I?
No, you've been in a midlife crisis for about a 5-year period of aging much faster than everyone else.
Well, I'm past midlife crisis, I think. Like, I'm 35, but heart attack's going to get me. It's right around the corner, like a shark attack. You know what I mean? I don't think that I'm gonna get to like 80.
A sports center anchor has to fake enthusiasm for sports.
I can't.
If you said to me, name someone in your life that would be the worst at faking enthusiasm.
Chipper Billy Gill, like on the morning. I want you to imagine him at 7 a.m.
It
like
gets worse.
with your morning Joe, Billy, like bringing you
He'll
up
be like,
for the sports
whatever.
day. Yeah, whatever. This was useless.
Well, okay, so
You start talking to a cameraman.
you want to know an actual. You want to.
About Fast and Furious or like some show about swords. He'll be talking with Kendrick.
Careful, people come out with those swords and
It
cut
was like
cars.
Eric, the stage manager, was telling me backstage.
Well, so you want to hear something more ridiculous than thinking that I'm not chipper enough to be a sports center anchor? So like there was a time that and I'll tell you who this person is that I admired, and I said that'd be a great career for me. Ryan Seacrest.
I mean, bad reality shows I could see more than Sports Center. But
I just
still.
say, you know what? This guy, he goes around, he hosts everything. He just kind of goes like, hey, how's it going? Oh, you're from Montana? Great. Oh, why did you tell me about this? Oh, wow, what a great singer you are. And then he goes on to the next thing. Then he hops into like a radio studio. He's like, oh, who's number 5 on the Ryan Seacrest top 10 for this week? In 10 minutes, he's out of there. Then he's off to his next game. Jumping on jets, having these mansions, doing all this stuff. And I was like, wow, you know what? I could do that, right? But now, based on what my peers are telling me, it seems like none of you believe that I could do what Ryan Seacrest does. And then to take it a step further, you know, just a couple weeks ago, James Corden was stepping down, and I said, you know who'd be a great replacement for him? Me. I could do that. I could replace James Corden,
I actually
right?
agree with you on that.
If I don't have to move to LA and I could just do this somewhere near in the Tamiami area, like they have an old, theater that's kind of abandoned right now, maybe we do something there. I mean, people like to come to
Turn
Miami,
the abandoned
right?
Kmart into your late show
Yes,
studio.
I didn't even think about that. Wow, that's a theater right there. And celebrities love coming to Miami. Why not? Why can't we make something like that work, right?
Definitely Southwest Miami-Dade is what they're thinking about.
Yeah, right by the
Thinking about-
canal. But you guys are now saying that that's not the case. You guys don't think that I have the disposition
Well,
to be...
Seacrest is now celebrating 20 years on air, which that'll make many of you feel old, I would imagine, because he used to be. He's done 20 years of being that.
Started with him and Dunkelman.
But he's aging in reverse. Like, he's younger than me now.
And so you feel like you've underachieved because you spent your week not knowing that Stugotz was in California?
You know what? Maybe that's what maybe Stugotz was holding me back this whole time. Maybe it's not me. Maybe I do have this sunny disposition somewhere inside of me
And Stugotz
that
has
wants
killed
to
it?
come out. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. You guys don't think I could be Ryan Seacrest?
I think you could be James Corden, or not do it in the precise way that James Corden did. But I think you could do a late show
I
very
think
well.
you could carve out a lane as awkward host of things with a distinct personality. Yes, I do think.
Awkward.
What were you pointing at in the corner of the room and laughing at, Whittingham?
Tony said, so you can be Ryan Seacrest, but I can't be in the G League.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, sure. Thank you for that. It's worth like $500 million. Normal guy, totally normal guy. Yeah.
Can you guys get for me, please, the sound of Amin El-Hassan accidentally stumbling upon hardcore porn on his computer with Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer? Whittingham, what do people need for context on this? So speaking of awkward, we're just going to sink into the reaction of all of these people realizing at once. Well, it's not all of them at once. It's O'Connor and Amin figure out first, oh, look at what we've seen, and then Mo and Tom and Zach are appalled and confused.
Yeah, for the first 10 seconds, they're like, what's happening? And then once Amin starts his alibi, Zach Harper immediately recognizes, oh my God, you left this on your computer. So the context is that you will hear at some point Tom Haberstroh introducing Kevin O'Connor, and then you can very quietly hear Amin say the word oops. That's the key word that we're looking for here.
Okay, thank you.
Keyword oops.
This is a nice audio experience here as you lead as a guide. Keyword oops.
Game show host.
To this audio.
That's another one I want.
When Amin says oops is where hilarity and hijinks ensue. If you want to find really good analysis of last night's game, better than what we're doing around here.
It all dissolved after this happened. So like the first 25 minutes of the podcast were A+ basketball analysis. The rest was tainted.
Was
by
better
this
than that.
incident.
This was the breaking point where our post-game show came apart. You could check out Cinephobe with Zach Harper and Amin. You could check out Basketball Illuminati with Tom Haberstroh and Amin. Both of those have been doing really good, successful numbers. Let's play for the people here what happened last night to Amin El-Hassan, who is reckless and does irresponsible things.
We've got Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer joining us on the post-game show.
Yeah.
What the hell? Okay.
You can't figure it out, can you?
In my defense,
KOC's trying so hard to get out of here. Yep.
in my defense, hold on. In my defense, believe it or not, I can't even say this shit out loud. In my defense, we were doing research for a movie that involved a certain adult film actress, and so I was searching.
That's
walking on the computer. Whoa! What are you doing? You left your computer earlier. What are you doing, Amin?
Hold on.
Goodness.
That was
What are you doing at
7
the
hours
game?
ago.
Like,
That was
I
7
swear to
hours
God.
ago.
I swear to God, it was research. I swear to God.
Yo,
Zach, you know what?
did KOC just catch you watching porn?
I mean,
what just
I don't know
happened.
what you're talking about.
No, hold on.
I don't know what you're talking about.
We recorded
What
a podcast
podcast?
today. What's up?
Sure.
What podcast? What are you talking
Cinephobe.
about?
It's called Cinephobe. It's the podcast where you and I watch movies that are poorly rated on Rotten Tomatoes.
We don't watch
Try to ascertain
porn.
whether they're actually poorly rated or perhaps didn't get a fair shake at Cinephobe. Produced by Anthony Mays, wherever you get podcasts. This month, Matthew McConaughey month. And we were watching a movie, and in the movie, there was an adult film star that I did not know was an adult film star.
I don't know about this. I don't know about this.
I decided
This sounds
to, like,
very
in
fishy.
the middle of doing the podcast, search.
You didn't know she was a.
If I could pull up the
Film
tabs again,
star.
I will show you the name.
I mean, you can pull up your history.
Yeah, I can show you.
No, you don't.
No,
no, Kevin, no.
It was, yo,
No.
it's whatever you are imagining in your head, it's like 100 times worse.
It's worse.
I have never heard Amin that ashamed and defensive. I have never heard anyone in the history of audio spend an entire segment backpedaling.
If I find out that somebody in a movie is a former, adult film star, I got the gist of it. Like, I get it. I now know they're a former adult film star.
Yeah.
I don't have to oh, you know what? I don't know what you mean by that. Let me Google it.
Research doesn't really work here. Research when Kevin O'Connor, how much funnier is this, Whittingham, with the faces of the people involved? Because you have the video there as well. Do you see, is there a screen cap of just Amin and Kevin O'Connor when they both realized at the same time, oh my God, there are porn links all over this computer?
They both turn away from the camera and run onto the floor of the Chase Center, where Andrew Wiggins hit a big shot.
They
is
run
essentially-
away from the computer?
They run away from the computer. Well, I mean, Amin had to very quickly exit out of it, one would presume, so that no one walked by and see what was on his computer. But he very quickly turned around and ran the other way.
My favorite in the video is the other three guys in the Zoom, because when Amin starts stammering, they don't know that that's what he's stammering about. So they're kind of indifferent about it. And then when he finally gets to why he's stammering, Zach Harper's reaction is just great on video.
He sounds defensive immediately, does he not? It's nervous laughter. It feels like fake laughter. Roy, you've got opinions here.
Wouldn't we all, though? I mean, come on.
I mean,
when
it's
you have-
terrifying.
When you have
It's my
porn on your
worst
computer,
nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. When you have porn on your computer, of course you're gonna be defensive, oh, somebody's walking behind me. Oh no, this guy there.
That's why most people don't do it on an NBA court.
Yeah, or a company computer.
Or 7 hours earlier on the computer at the hotel. I believe that this is as shameful a moment as an American media member has had in sports. I believe this should be a TMZ kind of scandal. I believe that disgraced Amin El-Hassan, last seen dancing behind Grand Hill to try and get
But Whitty pointed this out earlier. That could have been Steve Kerr.
We would have gone viral. It would have gone viral. It would have been on World Star Hip Hop. if Steve Kerr was there.
There isn't a blog in the universe that wouldn't have ended up on if that was Steve Kerr.
It honestly still should.
If you just had the screen cap of a horrified Steve Kerr and being like, Amin, why is there butt sex on your
Oh, whoa, wow, whoa.
Hell yeah.
Wow.
I think Amin should own this and make this his thing. Yes. Right?
He was
Whenever
the
a guest is on,
he was
like,
the
just,
drunk reporter. Yeah.
What is the thing?
Now he's the porn reporter.
The
Oh,
porn
sorry,
addict.
porn report.
Doing research.
Porn report.
It's like a punk show. And Billy's trying to create like the interview show.
Reporter.
The porn rapport.
I think that's probably a crime.
Billy's trying to create the chicken wing interview show where they eat hot spices, where it's just a mean and a wacky type of punk show with sports people where you just think you're being interviewed and bang,
Bang.
plot twist.
The porn gets progressively more hardcore.
Gonna be a new
The first
podcast.
chicken wing, it's just like kissing.
I don't like that.
It's gonna be a new
For the
podcast.
record, this was not Billy's idea. No.
No. It's gonna be a new podcast called Cineporn, and Amin's gonna review these porns.
What's
that were
Cineporn?
rated. I'm trying to ascertain some porn.
The ass.
Amin right now is in a state of disgrace, correct? Amin is ashamed. Does he
it's-
need to apologize publicly?
At time of recording, it is 6:15 Pacific, and I can't imagine Amin El-Hassan slept more than 30 minutes last night. Just reliving the moment where he and Kevin O'Connor are looking at pornography on the floor of the NBA Finals.
Do we need to
together.
do an investigation here? Do we need to call O'Connor? Do we need to call Zach? Do we need to call Amin? Do we need to conduct a full Metal Lark HR investigation into inappropriate workplace practices?
So I don't know if that's a company computer, but I mean, you can theoretically say that it was for research, right? Yeah, you could. You can make
sure.
like the alibi that he provides does add up. It just ends up on the floor of the NBA Finals, and then we've got a problem.
Do you guys, like me, find yourself a bit childish and uncomfortable around Steph Curry's parents being divorced and having gone in our lifetime from America's quaint couple to now bringing significant others to Steph's game, and no longer the snapshot that they used to be of the happy generational family, but instead are a snapshot of divorce and their new love interests?
Well, do you know the story about? This
true?
we'll need to research, but there is the internet says that.
Can we do the reckless speculation here?
Yeah,
because it doesn't feel like. Thank you, Billy. You got to protect us there because Whittingham's reckless.
Time to throw away all journalistic credibility and get reckless. Here is something we like to call reckless speculation.
I think
You're good.
Yeah. Single Windsor Witty's a different guy, man. I'm telling you.
So the internet says that the new significant others for the Currys were once a couple. So the man that was with now Steph Curry's mom was married at one point to the woman who is now with Steph Curry's father.
Wow.
So the two couples
It's entangled.
split and then came together in a different way, reportedly.
Yet more uncomfortable. I was already made uncomfortable in a way that I knew was childish on my part. Grow up, Le Batard. It's not your marriage. It's not your love. Let people live their dreams. But you sold it to me as an American parable about how superstardom can be had after Michael Jordan. And you sold me the family stuff. All of you sold me family. Steph, happily married man, carded. He's in the second round of the playoffs. He's getting carded at the movie theater. America's new face of basketball.
It's a modern family. What's wrong with swapping?
Put on the poll, Guillermo, at Le Batard Show. What's wrong with swapping? Yeah.
Let's play the game where we go around the room and say a friend of ours we'd like to swap with most.
No.
Let's really not do that. I
No,
don't
not work
know.
people.
I
Let's not
don't
make it
wanna- I
inappropriate.
don't
Like just
wanna-
people in our lives.
No.
No.
You get the ball rolling and see if we figure out how the game
go ahead,
works.
Chris. Go
Well,
ahead.
now
Yeah,
I'm
it's
feeling
work.
alone, so now I don't want to play this game anymore.
That's too bad.
A guy in, I believe, Utah who had over 70 wives and 400 children or something like that. I haven't watched the documentary yet on Netflix because there is just an absolute abundance right now of documentaries and like scripted, not documentaries, but like scripted shows about cults everywhere on every streaming service. And I'm wondering why cults are having a moment right now. If you have a story about a cult, like it's just getting greenlit. Like there's so much out right now.
It's not just that. And I really do wonder as these things become darker and all the more addictively edible, whether it is cults, whether it is fraud having a moment, or whether it is murder overtaking podcasts. Good God, we've gone dark on some of our consumption options.
I feel like the murder podcasts had their moment, and now everyone's like, that was a weird trend. Like, that was really kind of tragedy porny. Like, let's move on. And then fraud had its moment because it was like, okay, well, we can still laugh at white-collar crime because, like, the victim in white-collar crime is all of us, right? It's not blood and guts and violence necessarily. Sometimes they go hand in hand, but there was a lot of white collar crime documentaries coming out for a while, and then I wonder if like maybe this is where like the bridge happened. The white collar crime documentaries kind of turned into like a lot of shows about like multi-level marketing schemes, like the Lula Road documentary. That was crazy on Amazon Prime. I don't know if you guys watched that.
Yes, I've seen that, and I've seen much of this cult stuff. I've not gotten into the murder podcast, but I'm asking tied together the three of them as mass consumption options that will make your faith in things and people deteriorate because of how awful people can be. I can get any one of these bad roommates, bad people stories greenlit by Netflix, even as Netflix shrinks a little bit, because all of this is dark porn that we're addicted to, and cults are just the latest thing on how can these people get brainwashed by this yogi who just wanted sex, or Jim Baker, just all of it seems like it's corrosive almost, that our consumption, our entertainment is just the worst of us.
Is not the common thread between all of these things that have their moments is I could or I would never, right? It's the
yes, absolutely.
Like I would never fall into a cult. I could never envision myself, committing the kind of white collar crime that the Tinder swindler is just basically what an asshole.
He's already graduated to club appearances and his own podcast and fame. He's going to be
legitimately
rewarded.
rich now because of his Netflix fame. But yeah, I think Woody, it is absolutely the type of content that causes you to have like a reflection upon yourself, because it seemed I actually recently read a book about the language of cults called Cultish. It was a very interesting read. It's very easy to just kind of dismiss people who are in these groups, whether or not you can classify them as cults or whatever you want to classify them as like brainwashed and indoctrinated, and like separate yourself from them. But then you watch something like the Lula Roe documentary, and I'm not calling that a cult, but it's a group of people who kind of like, you feel like it's a community you want to belong in, and in the process of becoming part of it, you have to sacrifice a lot of your free time and your friends and give up a lot of your money. And so there are people who have like compared it to a cult. And so there's different levels of this thing. You might see something like the Gwen Shamblin one on HBO, which I'm in the process of watching right now, and be like, well, I would never join that. Like, that's crazy. And then you might join like, a fitness class. You might be in a fitness class where you're going every single day at 6 a.m. and you become a huge fan of the person teaching the class, and then you're suddenly using all the lingo of the person teaching the class, and then all your friends are doing that, and they're in the class with you, and all you guys talk about is this fitness class, and it's like, oh, like there's different degrees of this. And I think when you watch these documentaries, you sit and you kind of have to be like, people can be really manipulative and just ultimately seeking power and money for themselves.
No, and people can also be really easily manipulated.
Exactly. And people can be easily manipulated. And
am I one of those people that could be easily manipulated?
Right. Like, if you're in a certain community, maybe it would be very easy to see how, you feel like a group like this gives you a sense of belonging and like a higher purpose and a larger goal. But then, these groups never, get you by telling you the craziest thing that they do, right? They get you by like, well, if you're part of our group, like, we'll all be really happy and we'll get to do this, this, and this together. And then it keeps like escalating.
As long as
further
I can
and
have
further.
17 wives.
Well, as long as you can give me $10,000 or something. Like there's always some financial thing. And that's like one of the hallmarks of it being like a cult is like someone somewhere's profiting from it.
You have been obsessed here for a while, though. For some reason, it's not just that cults are having a moment now as a content stream that more and more we are going to see, right? Because there was a backlog, because the pandemic didn't allow people to make things. You are now being flooded with content. You're being flooded. A portal has opened to what was a constipated content stream, and now you've got just an overwhelming amount of shit in your life. Some of it with cults in it. You've been following cults here, though, for a while there. You have claimed for a while that this show is a cult, and...
Well, Dan, okay, so I read this book about the language of cults, and they lay out some criteria for, like, how cult leaders can indoctrinate people to follow them along. And as I was listening to this book, reading this book on Audible, I started thinking to myself, like,
I actually thought that you sat down on vacation and read a book.
Please.
Like you were lying on a beach in Portugal. No, you didn't. You listened to a book.
I read it on the plane on my headphones. And I thought to myself, like, some of this stuff, like, we kind of do on our show. And maybe that's why our show is so popular, because we've created... And, like, cult is obviously a term that elicits, like, a big visceral response to. Like, cults are bad, right? But there's, like, different types of groups, whether or not you want to call it a cult or not, that can elicit like a following. And that's kind of what our show is. Like the language that we use about ourselves and like we and our listeners are definitely things that cult leaders have been accused of using to get people to follow
examples.
Along. Well, I'll give you an example of like one thing that I learned in this book was that like cult leaders will use like a certain like type of lingo. And if you're in on the lingo, then like that's a sign that you like
Singo.
you're in and you belong. Zagaki.
But if you're not, you don't get the show.
You get the show.
Why do you imagine cult movies are in right now? You guys were saying it is the I would never or I would, but all of these, the murder ones are not as indicative of this, but when you talk about fraud, would I succumb to that fraud? Would I have been manipulated? How could I have gotten manipulated? You think these are in now because people just are fascinated by... We've lived long enough now that many of the things that I have experienced in sports are now being passed as 30 for 30 documentaries. The 2001 Ravens, all of these things that I have lived are now history. So cults are recent enough that we think of them as something in the past, correct? We don't think of them as something in the now.
Well, I think they're definitely both. I think there was probably a period between like the 80s and 90s, maybe the 70s to the 90s, where people were like super cognizant of these groups because there were some very famous, like the Branch Davidians and Ruby Falls. Like there were some very like famous things that happened in the news, and Jonestown. Like all of those things were kind of in the same time period. And I think like I don't exactly know why we're re-examining them now and why it seems like there's such a popular topic, but I do think it's interesting. Like it's a lot of times very sad because there are people that get hurt, but it is interesting because you kind of learn about a period in history and how these things kind of work. And so it's interesting to think about how other people can be so different from you and yet you're kind of the same. And then I also wonder if there's a thing to be said for like people in today's society. Like, I could be totally off on this, but like people in today's society feeling disconnected from being in a larger group as a whole. Like we're not like religion isn't as popular now, like organized religion, I should say, as it was 50 years ago, right? And so like I think maybe because our attention spans are so fragmented and we belong in like fewer groups, that we are interested in what extremes people go to feel part of a group, because I think that is a very human nature, like to want to be part of a group and feel like you belong.
But isn't that what's happening everywhere in America right now, where cults are forming politically?
I mean, I think that's why it's so interesting to look at because you can relate it back to what's happening in politics and feeling like you're part of a tribe.
People do
right?
want to belong to something. You don't want to be a lonely nomad mercenary wandering the globe, not just alone but lonely. You want the echo chambers and everything that's happening with the changing of our habits, where we are surrounding ourselves with like-minded people, is also something that evolves into us fighting each other, one silo against the other, because we're all in our separate cults.
Yeah.
And being a part of a digital community as well. And I would imagine, though, that, well, first off, I think that Netflix definitely knows that we're into this. Like, that's the thing. You have to start from the premise of they know that we're into it, because they wouldn't keep making it if they didn't know that we were into this kind of stuff. But I think what we've kind of realized is that I do think a lot of people watch television to judge the people that are on the television. That you look at people in a cult or who started the cult and
The
go,
Jerry Springer secret, really,
Yeah.
to feel better about your own life because you're not as pathetic as these people.
Oh, that's 100% true. It's like I'm gonna watch this, cult documentary and be like, wow, those people are crazy. I would never do that. And then I'm
but
gonna
they're so stupid, they fell for it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to my workout class and be like, oh my god, like we're all talking, using the exact same language. We're all doing the same thing. Like we all dress the exact same. We're in matching sets from Outdoor Voices. It's like, how is this any? Like it's maybe not.
It is different, and
That
that it
different,
usually
but-
doesn't have 12 wives and perhaps a whole bunch of embezzlement
Yeah,
involved.
but like you can see how now there have been cases where like, and I'm just using fitness classes because I think it's like the easiest example to make. Like you've seen cases where fitness instructors have been accused of verbally abusing people in their classes, and people just accept it. And it's like you can kind of see how that could potentially escalate into something much worse, because the entry is like, well, I'm just going to a spin class. Like, I'm just, going to work out. What's wrong with that?
I think
and then it turns into something much darker and more sinister.
I think that all of the psychological testing that I have seen in studies are that human beings do tend to be a whole lot better at following than leading. Following even into things of questionable moral judgment, because we're just better at following than we are. We want to be led. We don't want to lead. Leading becomes hard, and when leaders get into power, I mean, I thought when you said that cults are having a moment, I felt like there was a genre for a while there of just yogi senseis who were manipulating their power in the spiritual realm to get hand jobs, to get sexual favors. I thought was a whole genre unto itself before the cult.
Yeah, like the Bikram 30 for 30 that ESPN did a while ago was really good, and that one was interesting because I think it defied what the common person views as a cult. And I don't even know if you can call that a cult. I don't necessarily know who gets to decide what's a cult and what's just an abuse.
Just religion?
Abuse. Well, yeah. I mean, there's similarities with both, I think. But, like he was abusive to people, but he was still able to garner a following with them despite that. And so you wonder, like, well, how can this be, and how can I don't know, what lesson can I learn from this, I guess. Like I think like we're taught from an early age that you want to have like everything that you consume, there should be like a moral to it, like in Aesop's fables, right? And so when you're watching these like documentaries, it's like, what kind of moral applies here? Like, what am I taking away from it? Because it seems like nothing I do in my life is this crazy or extreme, right? But maybe it is. Like, maybe you just haven't thought of it in that way yet.
I just haven't thought of 12 wives deviant or starting the Mormon religion deviant. I don't know how many exercise class parallels I can find to I'm going to start a religion around the fact I get to have as many wives as I want. I get to manipulate a cult of people. I mean,
And you can't even have that many producers without our audience complaining about it. So this doesn't apply to our little group here.
Sports is a cult. Makes people crazy. I don't think it's a unified cult. It's sort of an accepted, hey, we're all in this cult together.
Right. I think if there was like a science experiment that someone from another planet came in and did on humans, they would show up to a football stadium and be like, what's going on here?
Oh, my God. Yeah, go ahead and explain to people. Go ahead and explain to reasonable, rational, intelligent life. Hey, the jumping up and down that people do around the third quarter of a three-pointer made, they don't do it around the birth of their children, what they describe as the happiest moment of their life in the hospital room, seeing a child born. No one jumps up and down with joy anywhere, maybe musically, anywhere the way they do with sports. You never express yourself with that kind of emotion anywhere.
Also, like defending controversial figures because they wear the same colors as your team. That's a very common thing in sports that people probably don't stop to consider, like, if someone else was doing this and it wasn't in sports, I'd probably judge them for it. But because it's me and I love
Or
my
if they did it for
team-
your rival.
Right, exactly.
Then you judge the hell out of them.
There's lots of double standards to be had there. But yeah, like sports are an interesting one. And when you talk about like the language of cults, like this book that I read, there's certainly
Billy, did she read the book or did she not read the book? Where are you on this?
I think she heard the book, yeah.
She heard the book.
Yeah.
You heard the book, Jessica.
She said she heard it. Yeah,
but
she
Mike,
read it.
Mike says this as well. Did we make a determination on this? Is audio listening? Is the evolution? Is it no longer reading if technology gets to a place where it doesn't require your eyes to absorb words and translate them into thoughts?
Here's the thing about listening to a book, reading a book on headphones, as I like to call it. If I'm reading an actual physical book in front of me and holding it, then I can't do anything else. That's all my attention. But if I'm listening to it, Dan, I can be on TikTok. I can be drawing in my Portugal coloring book that I bought on the plane. I can be doing a million things. So it allows me, I can go for a walk. You know what you can't do while you're reading a book? You can't go for a walk. You'd walk into something. And that's why I like to read books
But
on my
that's the
headphones.
point. The point is that a book commands 100% of your attention. Therefore, you digest all of the things. It's not like, oh shit, I was cleaning my dishes for 5 minutes of chapter 4, so I don't remember what was said in those 5 minutes.
No. Listen, books need to get over themselves. No one gives 100% of their attention to anything anymore. And books need to evolve or they're going to die.
Exactly.
The most you can get is like 80% attention from anyone.
That is scientifically, exactly, Billy. I actually retain better when I hear something versus when I read it. If I have to read something, I'll usually have to like read it over a few times before I really absorb it. But if I'm listening to it, it's like, oh, I know exactly what's happening.
The results of our poll asking the audience if listening to an audiobook counts as reading came back as no by 54%. So the audience does not determine listening to a book to be reading it.
That's ridiculous because this audience listens to like 6 hours of our show every day. Don't they want to consider that reading?
You've already called them a cult?
They're definitely not a cult, but careful because they are very passionate.
And now you're saying that...
I did not call them a cult. I called us a cult.
Well, a cult has followers, and you're basically saying that people who listen to the show are cult followers. So be very careful right now.
It's too late. I don't think she has been careful at all here. I believe she has been reckless in a variety of different ways throughout this segment. Billy, I'd like to get your thoughts here on everything that is is being said because you seem to have an opinion from over there.
I was only giving 40% of my attention to that.
You listening to a book back there?
The reading, you cannot do anything else while reading, and I believe that is both the beauty of reading and why it's dying, because we require through evolution more, and what Jessica is saying is I need to be able to read a book while also doing other things. This is evolution. I'm going to be in 7 things at once. I can no longer watch a sporting event or commercials. I only get everything I want. My cult entertainment, my fraud entertainment, my murder podcast, because I can do 3 other things while I'm doing those things.
But some books are tricky, right? And then it's like, do I want to go back and reread this last 2 chapters? Because I don't know what the hell's going on in this chapter, right? Where like if I'm listening to something like watching like on a DVD or whatever, not DVD, but like streaming, I could just like rewind and go back to the part that I missed. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And I'll just skip back ahead to where I was.
I've read entire chapter books where I realized at the end of it that I hadn't digested any of it because I was thinking about something else and I was just looking at words on a page. I wasn't actually digesting it. And so I had to start back over again because I need to have enough attention to give 100% and really dig into what I'm looking at here.
My favorite...
Is that not like part of the pleasure of the experience?
No, because my favorite, maybe for you, but I'm just saying my favorite activity is 2 activities, baking and drawing. And I can do both of those things while I listen to a book. Even better. Last week, I made a key lime loaf while I listened to a book about the swamp peddlers who developed all the land in Florida. And guess what? I ended up with a loaf and a little bit of history knowledge.
This is why you are Stugotz. I hope Angel creates a T-shirt that just reads, my favorite activity is 2 activities. Jessica Smetana.